Thank you, WebEx AI, for that. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our February Show and Tell event. We have a great slate of presenters today, and I'm excited to see their presentations and hear about their collections. For those of you who don't know, my name is Patrick Cash, and I'm the current president of the Society for North Carolina Archivists. And we'll be kind of moderating the screen sharing today because WebEx doesn't want to cooperate with us, but also we'll be moderating the questions and answers at the end of the presentation. We are going to go through our presenters, and then at the end, we will take any questions and answers. You can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat, and I'll read it out. So we'll do that, and then I kind of have a quick just housekeeping thing at the end of it, and then we'll be on our way. So I want to welcome our three presenters and thank you for them today. First up, we have Celine Shay from Appalachian State, Rebecca Pattillo from Duke University, and Kelly Wooten from Duke University. I'm sorry if I butchered anybody's names. But we will start our presentation this afternoon up first, hearing from our colleagues and the great collection at Appalachian State. We can't hear you right now.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Cool. It isn't a professional event if like someone's microphone isn't working at some point or another. Hello everyone, I'm Celine Shay. I am one of the processors at Appalachian State University Special Collections. I've been working on the Lenore Family Papers collection that we recently got in, and I saw this event because one of my colleagues sent it over, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to share a little love story that I discovered through some of the letters. Patrick, could you please go to the next slide? So I want to start with some family history and details. If you're not familiar with the area, the town of Lenore is about 30 or 40 minutes away from Appalachian State University, not too far from Hickory, and about an hour from Charlotte. The person that I will be talking about today and discussing more about is Thomas Isaac Lenore, who was a part of the Lenore family. He is the son of Thomas Lenore and Selena Louisa Avery. His family had several properties throughout the area, one of which was called the Bachelor's Den. That's where a lot of the single men in the family went for a little while they were figuring out their affairs and figuring out what they're going to do. And Thomas especially spent a lot of time there. Something that I did want to share as well is that Thomas caught my attention while processing this collection because you can see his personality through his letters, which is incredibly special because these are letters from the 19th century. And so you can tell just from his signature and his handwriting, the kind of person that he is. He was using blue paper, which was unusual during the time, that was often sparkly because he put mica in it. So that's always special to see. And in addition to that, he, while most people would fold letters and use a letter as the envelope, he would have a separate envelope to put the letters in, which is another special thing to see during the 19th century. So, Patrick, if you could go to the next slide, I'll show off the letter, please. So this is a letter that Thomas sent to his brother Rufus Lenore. It was in 1861 that he sent this letter. I included a transcription on the right side because his cursive can be a little bit more tough to read, especially because, as you can tell, he's very excited in this letter. And what I want to direct your attention to is the last part of the letter where he says, and this, in the exciting state of the times, is taken into consideration together, and the fact that I am going to be married on next Thursday morning. And so he is telling his brother how excited he is. You don't really hear much about women in his letters until you get to this letter in particular, where he starts talking about this woman that he plans to marry. And then if we could go to the next slide, please. It continues on, and he's saying, I may not make a lot of sense because I'm so excited and there's so much going on, but I want to write you a longer letter about it. And so this is just one example of the affection that Thomas has for this young lady that he ended up marrying, and the relationship that he also had with his family. He often sent letters to his father and to his other brothers and sisters to convey what was going on in his life, the things that he was noticing, especially during the start of the Civil War. But this in particular just caught my attention, especially when it comes to 19th century relationships. You don't typically see this kind of behavior of like, I'm so excited to get married, especially from this man who's an older brother in his family. And if you want to go to the next slide, I also just highlighted in a bigger section what exactly that section looks like of him like freaking out about getting married. There are many more letters in this collection. There are about 300 so far, and we're not quite finished processing them. But this, again, is just my personal favorite. There are also love letters from Rufus Lenore and his wife Sarah Lenore, and there are quite a few of those. So when these letters are available and fully processed, anyone is more than welcome to come on by and take a look at these wonderful love letters. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And it's nice to see my parents live in Lenore, and I didn't know who Lenore was named for. So now I do. So thank you very much for that, and we'll be excited to see as that collection continues to being processed. And please share any updates with the membership. We'd love to hear about it. So, all right. So next up from Duke University, we're going to hand it over to Rebecca.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Rebecca Pattillo from Duke University. I'm the Assistant University Archivist, and I am going to talk about parapsychology paramours today. Advanced slide, please. Okay, so the parapsychology lab records, we have them at Duke. They are a massive collection, and they span about 340 linear feet and about 700 boxes. So what is parapsychology? It's the study of psychic phenomena such as ESP, telekinesis, telepathy, mediumship. And in the 30s to the 50s, it was a serious kind of avenue of scientific study, and we did have a parapsychology department here at Duke. It was nested in the psychology department. It started in 1935 by J.B. and his wife, Louisa Rhine, who ran the lab. And they also had many fellow researchers, who, including Rhea White and Margaret Anderson, who I'm going to focus on today. And the lab disaffiliated with Duke in 1965, pretty much after Rhine retired and no one really wanted to take it up. And I think because at this time it was maybe kind of going out of fashion as a serious mode of scientific inquiry, but it still operates today as the Rhine Research Center in Durham, and they are a very active community. This image here is of J.B. Rhine with some fellow researchers testing extrasensory perception using these what's called Zinner ESP cards, and we do have the cards in the collection, which are a lot of fun to bring out. The students, when I do instruction, get a real kick out of it. Okay, advanced slide. So these two researchers that worked at the lab, one is Margaret Anderson, who has a PhD, I don't remember in what, but she was at the lab in 1954 to 59. And Rhea White, who, shout out, is a librarian. She is kind of known as the bibliographer of parapsychology, and she was at the lab from 54 to 58. And while they were together, they both worked very closely together on what they were called the Anderson-White school experiments. And this studied basically the social relationship between student and teachers, and to figure out if that close kind of social dynamic affected ESP performance in any way. And they've written several articles in the Journal of Parapsychology on their research. And Rhea is really interesting because she was going to be a professional golf player, but after a near-death experience, she began studying parapsychology, and that became kind of like her life's work. And she's most famous in the field for coining what's called exceptional human experiences. Next slide, please. So in the collection, there are about 70 letters from Rhea to Margaret Anderson. And we don't have any from Margaret Anderson, but we have all of these letters from Rhea, which are incredible to read. And so I picked out just a few to share with you. And this one I found really interesting because Ryan, their boss, kind of asked Rhea to spy on her fellow researchers, including Margaret Anderson. So one weekend, Marg, you had me frantic. I didn't know literally if I were coming or going. It wasn't love or the tender feelings that now make my relationship inwardly toward you. It was sheer physical desire. I was still bleeding from Fran, who was an ex of hers, completely exhausted and spent. And then comes you. I did nothing the whole weekend but go through this, imagining what it would be like to be in your arms, and then I'd almost go out of my mind. The next morning, like a bolt from the blue, boss, who's JB Ryan, called me in, and he unburdened himself like he does from time to time and asked me to do this and that, talking about watching people in the lab, not watching them, but trying to get them to understand. He said that the lab had a reputation to keep up, and it was important for the field that it should be kept that way. And then he says, for example, I forgot we'd been discussing Woody and Richard coming, and he was saying we have no idea about the background of people coming to the lab. For all we know, Woody and his friend might be homosexuals. This was before we saw either of them. And then he said, now we have no idea what Margaret's background is and why she had to leave Arizona. The lab can't afford to be compromised. Will you tell me if you notice anything? And so I was really struck by this because he's asking her to spy on these other folks that are coming in. And I'm not even sure, like, part of me wonders, did Ryan know about this relationship? I don't think so at this time because Margaret hadn't like made it there yet to the lab. But I was curious, of like, is this a veiled threat, or is he really just that clueless and asking her to spy on other people who may be LGBTQ? Anyway, she goes on to say, I think you're big enough to not take personally what boss said about you. As for your personal part in it, it rips me like it's ripping you. Society, people, blindness, etc., intolerance. As for my personal part in it, I can only beg forgiveness. My blessing and my curse is that I can see too well two sides to everything. Next slide, please. Okay. And this is the same letter, and this is circa around 1954. The last thing I hope I will ever do is limit myself. Yet this can't go on forever. There comes a time in everyone's life, if their living is going to be worthwhile and creative, when they have to choose their particular statue that they're going to try to carve. I'm guided by my desire to realize myself and that hunger for goodness and cleanness. And now I have parapsychology, which gives me a good means of channeling those desires without the use of entangling labels as yet. But though all this is true for several years, one thing has persisted as a possible specific cause that it might be worth dying for, and that is to stand up for homosexuality. I made a decision, and that decision was to go with you no matter what, even if it means leaving the lab, being ostracized. I don't feel it would be being a traitor to the field, for any future I have in parapsychology is bound up with you. And if life or boss or something doesn't force the issue, if we don't give ourselves away unconsciously, which very likely will happen if it hasn't, then I still have that damned promise. I may have to go tell him about myself. And then, of course, I have to think of what may happen. I like the respect of my fellows, but when the chips are really, really down, I hope I have the guts to prefer my own self-respect. To call homosexuality a perversion would be to lie to myself. And well, do I know that. And then she goes on to kind of talk about her relationship with her parents and how her parents always are kind of like, why don't you have a normal job? Why aren't you like a hostess? Or why aren't you a teacher? Or why aren't you married? And so she's kind of talking about like her relationship with her parents and how she doesn't, want to come out to them, but it might happen. And so she goes on, and now if I add standing out openly for homosexuality on top of it, I'd hate to do that to them. She means her parents. But if it comes down to it, I will. It would be wrong not to, for I have answered the question for myself that homosexuality is not wrong. It is with the right person, very, very right, in the highest and best sense of the word. Next slide. Okay, and this is still the same letter. And she says, when I think of the way I felt about Jean, who was also another person that she was involved with and her best friend over a long period of time, best friend, quote unquote, the way I feel about you, I can share it with life, with God, with the universe, as a wondrous part of being alive. Like I do with animals and the sunsets and the mountains. I give thanks for all of them, and they all draw me out of my smaller self to my larger self. And what I feel for you is to the ocean, like the ocean is to a drop of water. But when I think of facing boss, other people, with the way I feel, then I'm chicken because they don't see with my eyes. Their vision isn't far enough. No, no one has ever been around when I've been fighting my battles, so I haven't fought very well. I've gone off and I've cowered in the corner. Maybe I just don't plain have what it takes. I can't speak for myself until I know your love and you know mine. Then what kind of person will I be? And then she ends the letter with this sentence, which just like really struck me. You want to be creative, Mark, but do you realize that you have it in your power to recreate me? And like so many of her letters are talking about how this relationship with her is completely transforming who she is and how she feels about the world and how she moves through the world as a queer person. And I was just like really struck by this one letter. And then next slide, please. I promise we're almost near the end. It was hard to pick just a few things to read. But this is another one that I kind of want to talk about. So this is around, it was not dated, but probably around circa 1955. So also do I know about myself that I am not concerned in the matter of sexual choice, whether my mate be male or female. In this respect, I think not in terms of gender, but of personality, in terms of persons, not males or females. I love in terms of persons, and you are the first person who has ever fully aroused me. Before last fall, I never knew what the word meant, but I do now. I've known the desire and the need to make love, but never to be loved. That's the last thing for me to say now, that I don't want to be loved, and maybe that's why it is such a painful hope to be aware of. I'm budding rather late, and maybe that makes it harder, but there's a flower within me that won't be denied. Buddy, did you breathe me into being? In addition to apparently thinking in terms of persons, not sexes, I also require inwardly to love that person, and I love you. And I know that love with me cannot be something that bounds from object to object. It doesn't exist for me unless it is one person, for I guess what love is to me is the dedication of myself to another, and dedication strikes me as a unitary thing. And what I loved about this was I was reading it and I was like, I know we shouldn't put labels on like modern labels on historic figures, that we're very cautioned against doing that. But she's so eloquent with it describing how she feels because that language was not available to them. And so when I read this, I was like, oh, you're a pansexual queen, like, because she's talking about gender doesn't matter to her. She just loves the person. And I kind of felt too with this last paragraph, it's given a little demisexual too, because she's like, I got to know the person to like really be into them. And so this one just really struck me because of this conversation she's having with Margaret and how she's like struggling to express herself because she doesn't have the language, but she does a great job of it. Like, I totally get what she's trying to say here. Next slide, please. So when Anderson died in 1987, and Rhea White wrote her kind of like a tribute to her in the Journal of Parapsychology. And she talks about like all of the work that they did together and the work that Margaret did in her career. But this part really stuck out to me was she said, working with Marg Anderson was a wondrous experience. The only other experiences I could liken it to would be the spark of connection and creative inspiration or new love before the first words are spoken or the influx of divine grace. So clearly she's had this huge impact on her, even though they were not together. Like after they kind of left the parapsychology lab together, they kind of went their separate ways. But I love that she wrote this because I feel like she's leaving us little breadcrumbs. She's leaving us a clue here, like, because she's not openly saying we were in love, but she's pretty much saying that this woman had a profound impact on her life in many ways. Next slide, please. And here's Rhea with her 3 of many cats. This is also very queer coded. She loved cats. She had a lot of cats. So I wanted to thank Courtney Block, who was a recipient of Harry Harkin's travel grant, who also wrote about these letters a few years ago. And like I said, the parapsychology records are huge, and no one really knew that these love letters were kind of hanging out in there. I want to thank Kelly for like walking through this with me and telling me about these letters before. And because it's Valentine's, I have to thank my spouse Charlotte, who did come up with the name of the parapsychology paramours. So I have to give them due credit, and for giving me the honor of loving them. And I also want to thank our LGBTQ elders and ancestors, of whom I consider Margaret and Rhea to be.
All right, great job. Thank you for that. Fascinating collection. Hope I'm definitely going to read that blog. Would you mind putting that URL in the chat for everybody so they can, if anybody wants to see it? All right, so our last but not least presenter today, also from Duke University, will be Kelly, and we'll hand it over to her, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A at the end.
Great, thank you so much. And I have to say that Rebecca and I independently submitted our love letters and didn't realize till Patrick emailed us that not only do we both submit, but like they are both like queer and kind of in that ESP extra sensory world. So I'm Kelly Wooten. I'm Research Services Librarian for the Sallie Bingham Center for Women's History and Culture at the Rubenstein Library at Duke. I'm going to introduce you to Lucy Randolph Mason, talk a little about her papers, read from her letters, and then share a recent development in her story. I also want to include gratitude for my colleagues who've worked with this collection in the past to make it so beautifully organized, in particular Leah Tams, who reprocessed and more fully described the collection this past summer. So Lucy Randolph Mason, 1882 to 1959, is best known as a white suffragist and labor activist from Virginia who served for over 14 years as the public relations representative for the Congress of Industrial Organizations, or CIO, in the South. When she was young, to help support her family, she taught herself stenography and typing and worked in a law office in Richmond, Virginia, before becoming active in the Richmond Equal Suffrage League and the League of Women Voters. Mason served as industrial secretary, then general secretary for the Richmond YWCA, or Young Women's Christian Association, from the early 19-teens through 1932. And then in 1937, she moved to Atlanta, Georgia to work for the CIO in the South. Mason served as an ambassador for the CIO, an advisor to labor organizers, striking workers, and unions. She continued to work through 1951 before retiring due to poor health. Lucy Mason died in 1959 at the age of 77 in Atlanta. Throughout her career, Mason believed strongly that Christian principles and beliefs supported laborers' rights to organize, and much of her work focused on the relationship between churches and organized labor. She continually emphasized the importance of organizing both white and Black workers to improve economic and racial problems in the South. I listed a bunch of names and titles and descriptions of her in this list. I think anti-racist is sort of a retroactive title to label her, as well as lesbian, which I gave kind of an asterisk, which Rebecca's already mentioned. It's sort of ahistorical to give people names they didn't claim, but they are perhaps appropriate. Also had to cut out most of her biography because she's so fascinating. So this brief summary of her biography, while factually accurate, leaves out a meaningful piece of her personal life. Her archival papers leave out this piece, or rather this person, almost completely as well. In the bibliography for his biography of Mason, the author Salmond writes, "There are also a few family letters, and despite the fact that the collection was reportedly checked before deposit and almost all personal materials removed, enough remains to give a picture of Mason's relationship with Catherine Gerwick. What we know for sure is that Lucy and Catherine met in 1924 through the YWCA and soon became fast friends. In September 1925, the Richmond Times-Dispatch newspaper reported, Miss Lucy Mason, General Secretary of the YWCA, is back at her desk after a month's vacation spent in Michigan. Miss Mason attended a conference accompanied by Miss Catherine Gerwick from the National Board of the YWCA, who is well known in Richmond, where she has often spoken. Following the conference, Miss Mason and Miss Gerwick spent several weeks camping near Frankfort, Michigan. I think if this were a modern story, they would have driven there in a Subaru, perhaps with a U-Haul attached. But tragically, Catherine became ill in early 1927 and died in her parents' home with Lucy at her side. Lucy grieved deeply for the loss of this person who she considered to be her soulmate and found solace in spiritualism, which offered hope of a connection and communication between the living and the dead. In a letter to her friend Cecil Scott, which was dated October 31st, 1930, which is 3 years after Catherine died, Lucy wrote, "Another thing I believe is that if people on the other side of life have someone or several people who love them a lot, it helps them to direct energy into our world, especially if there is one person very, very close who understands and loves them tremendously and who believes that life and love can pass the barriers of death. I think they can use that person as a sort of fulcrum here, a powerhouse or base of energy. It seemed very real to me ever since Catherine died. We go on as co-partners in enterprises that are worthwhile. And she can get at lots of other people better because she has my heart and brain as a human center." She continues, "This fall, I have come into perhaps my fullest realization of living together with Catherine. It has grown into the fiber of my being. It makes light in the darkest places and gives confidence in the midst of perplexity. The gaiety is still there, and besides, another kind of joyousness springs up from a well so deep it taps the heart of the universe. But oh, how well I know the ache of physical missing, the hours when one seems almost defeated. It takes pain to make the tension that in turn produces spiritual awareness. Most of all, I hope that inner light grows and shows you that there is not any death, only a finer form of life that our bodies here are too heavy to perceive." So hearing Rebecca read those letters, that really resonates of like, they were together for a brief time, but like deeply impacted each other. Right. And she's writing this to another person. So like everyone knew how important Catherine was to her. All right. So next slide. Enough preamble. Here is the actual letter, which it's pretty lengthy, but could not cut it very much. So here we go. She writes, "In my room one Sunday in Atlanta, January 25, 1931. It has been years, beloved of my heart, since you walked the earth clothed in material frame. Yet this Sunday morning you are nearer than the air around me, fairer than the sunshine this brilliant day, sweeter than the exhalation of the most fragrant flower, dearer than the joyous life that throbs within me in response to the fair world without. With what sweet form you are now clothed, my imagination can only guess, and yet the guess seems strangely real and true. There is a likeness to that body which I knew, but so transformed, so much more abundantly vigorous, so victorious over time and space, so tenuous to my dull mortal sense, yet so indestructible in its essential elements, so fair and shining because of the inner light with which your radiant soul pours upon the outer self, that my blinded eyes can only guess how you would now appear had I the eyes to see you." Can you imagine someone writing that to you, even if like you were dead? "Yet the reality of your presence, not hands or feet, nor mind or vision, are more real than you. You remember how we would look into each other's eyes those years ago, seeing beyond the shining surface, seeing into the soul that lay behind the eyes, nothing veiled in me from you, nor in you from me. We saw each other in all that potential best, which is spirit animating matter. So this morning, so many thousand other times since you ceased to inhabit mortal body, we look into each other's eyes, interpreting to each other all the life we live, all the secret aspirations, all the desires, all the love of God and man, all the desire for fullest growth and freest growth. In you, nothing is hid from me. When these dear moments come, And in me, you see the scroll unrolled. You read me as I truly am. Weak, blind, dull, yet aspiring, seeing, perceiving the ideal that lies wrapped within me, within all human souls. There's nothing to fear when this spiritual bond reveals life in its essential significance. My soul walks free, tasting life and finding it good. Life here, life there, life in all God's universe. No place is strange, for you are there. No task impossible, for you share it. No defeat is defeat, for you help me find the lesson defeat would teach me. Spirit moves through gross matter, weaving finer forms, lifting the mud, transforming it into diamonds, shattering the darkness and bringing light, touching the ignoble and making it noble. There is no condemnation. Each of us stand where we must. Only so far have we come. The mistake, the injustice, the hardness, the lack of love today will tomorrow turn our feet in other paths. What long tomorrows I speak of, beloved, you fully understand. The new strange task is faced, the unfamiliar work is taken up, yet it's well known and there's no fear entering upon it. And I am gonna skip a little bit. Without you, what life would be, I cannot know, for in fact, life so far as I remember has never been without you. Love like that which lies between us can only mean that for endless eons we have walked hand in hand through suffering and joy, through defeat and victory, forging the bonds that now bind us so close that no power in all the universes can separate us. We laugh at death with his grim semblance of silence and invisibility, for we know he only leads to life. We see apparent separation as the only challenge to build our bridge to one another, strong and true, so the triumphant spirit can pass with incredible swiftness between us. We see darkness as the prelude to a dawn that dazzles with its white radiance. We see heartache as the cracking of the narrow walls of human caring so that all may come in and be at home with us and we with them. Ah, beloved, the wine of life is sweet and strong. The power of life is great and victorious. The beauty of life is illumined with such effulgence that the eye is dazzled in its radiance when one learns and practices the belief that life is all and death but one little door to greater being and infinite becoming. So thank you for indulging me reading this long, sappy letter, but it's just too beautiful. And at the beginning, I mentioned having a little bit of an update to share, which came in the form of an addition to this collection, which hasn't been processed yet, which was offered to us by a dealer. And the description of this collection as offered is a little bit of a spoiler. It's called Archive of Correspondence Sent to the Houston Family of Virginia, including 9 letters by Lucy Randolph Mason expressing her feelings for and queer encounters with other women. So if you had any doubts after those beautiful letters, one of these letters, which is excerpted in the dealer description, says, it's a Mason describing a chance encounter with someone named Mary Ann. And this was dated from October 1898 when Lucy was about 16 years old. And it's a letter to a friend of hers. So, I have the most honored right hand in America. I shook hands with her. The shivers of delight sailed up and down my backbone. I remember thinking her hand was very soft, but at the same time felt firmer and larger than expected. I think I held it a little too long. I know the temptation was strong to keep it and give it a kiss. So returning to that asterisk on the term lesbian, even with these sapphic yearnings that are expressed in these letters, I don't think we can put that label on Lucy Randolph Mason, but we can know that she loved her beloved partner, Catherine, in a way that endures way beyond even both of their lives. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. 3 great collections and 3 great presentations. So let me stop this here so I can open the chat. All right, so as I mentioned, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop it into the chat, and I'd be happy to read it out to our um, presenters here. But while we start out, or while we wait for that, I will start with one of these collections, or one of these, one question. And my question is for Rebecca. Rebecca, I know you said that there was the blog post that you put in there written about with this collection, but is this is this collection get used as much as it should it, Duke? Is it a heavily used collection that you guys have?
Yeah, and I just also I think when you stopped you thought you stopped screen share, but you stopped. I can't see anyone anymore. So, but I just see I see Kelly's screen, her last slide.
I did the wrong thing, so let's.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's just weird talking to a screen and not seeing anyone.
Yeah, let's see.
There we go. Okay,
There we go.
I can see people now.
Right.
Yes, this collection gets used a lot. I would say it's one of our more popular collections, and we use it in instruction quite a bit too. I can pop in the collection guide for it as well. Let's see. And a lot of times people, when they do come and research the collection, they also will go to the Rhine Research Center as well, because I believe they have records too, but I'm not sure. But let me pop it in. But yes, students get really into it because they just have no idea that it used to be kind of like a legitimate field of study at Duke. So yeah, they kind of navigate or gravitate towards it because of that. I've never had these letters out in an instruction session or anything, but we do something called summer camp, library summer camp, for it's like events for librarians by librarians, and we're talking about doing one called Gossip in the Archives, and I was gonna have these pulled for that just because they're amazing.
All right, that sounds great and something I want to join in on. So, not the gossip part, the summer camp part. All right, great. Real quick question for Celine and up at App States. So I know you said you're still processing this collection, but have you come across any letters between the husband and wife that are as exciting to talk to each other as the brother to brother?
Funny enough, I haven't, not yet. I wouldn't be surprised. It's funny because this collection is spread out between 3 institutions. So Duke has some, UNC has some, and then we have some. So it's very possible that UNC or Duke has those letters, especially because I believe Duke has Thomas's father, Thomas, his personal items as well. So not yet, but I still have a lot more letters to go through. So I'll keep you updated if I do find anything.
So for next February's show and tell, when we do love letters, we'll have a joint Duke and Appalachian State and UNC presentation on the Lenore love letters. So we'll go ahead and pin that on the calendar for today. All right. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? We did get one comment in the chat. Just really appreciated how these presentations also touched on self-love. So thank you to our presenters for that. But please feel free to ask questions in the chat or unmute yourself. I'll play the Jeopardy music in my head while I wait. All right, we have a question for Rebecca. How did these love letters end up in that institutional collection?
I would assume because that's where Margaret had them. Because we have, if you look up where, I'm going to pop up in the collection guide, there's a lot of materials for Margaret Anderson and all of her research, and it kind of like is mixed in. And on the finding aid, it just says like letters from Rhea White to Margaret Anderson. So anyone looking at the collection guide and knowing their work would just assume that it's probably about their their work together in the lab, and not until you actually start to read them. And interesting enough, there is one additional letter in the folder that is from another woman named Helen to Margaret, and it's clearly another like person that she was entangled with at some point. So I don't know if it's just the way Margaret was storing her materials at the lab, and then they were left behind. I don't know. But I mean, they came in with all the other materials from parapsychology.
All right, thank you for that. All right,
And I will say
going-
too, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There was another letter that I had beta reading, but it was a little not safe for work. So there's like no doubt that these two women were lovers. But it's a beautiful letter, but it is very steamy.
All right, we'll do show and tell after hours for that one. So, all right, going once, going twice, final call for questions, either in the chat or the unmute.
I just want to say that, like, thinking about the collection I talked about and Rebecca's, and also including Celine's, it's like we don't know where our letters are going to end up, or like what's considered public or private content. And I mean, from the little excerpt I read, like the collection, the Mason papers were clearly stripped of a lot of personal content. But I think I need to do some more research, but by this probably herself, who was placing the collection here. And it's just really interesting to think about these afterlives of these papers that we leave behind, and like what's revealed intentionally or not.
I think it's fascinating too. I didn't get a chance to get a formal presentation together, but we here at ECU, we did just recently unrestrict a collection that had been restricted for a number of years from the donor. And looking into it, I was fascinated because it's this one woman who's writing during World War II to like 30 different soldiers. And she's writing these love letters to like 30 different people at the same time. None of who end up being the one that she marries, according to her obituary. So these letters truly are fascinating that we find in the collection. So thank you for sharing these 3 great collections for that, and thank you for spending time with us today. Really quick at the end, I just want to promote and remind everyone that the call for proposals for this year's conference, which will be joint between SNCA and the South Carolina Archival Association, we still have 2 more days to get those proposals in. They are due Friday, February 13th by 5 o'clock. I will drop the link to the conference, the annual meeting information there in the chat. I highly encourage everyone to, if you have something that you think would be a great presentation or a poster or a panel or a lightning talk, anything like that, please submit. Our presenters, I encourage you, if you'd like to continue this, please present there as well. I think they'd be great topics. Also to our presenters, as you continue on the processing or find more stuff, feel free to share it with us with SNCA, and we'll put it on the blog as well as our social media channels, and be happy to share our membership up with the or our membership updates on these great collections. So again, thank you all. This presentation will be posted on YouTube and the social media channels, as well as the website here in the next couple of days, and we will send out an announcement for that. And this will be the last show and tell for this spring as we gear toward the semester, but hopefully we will have an interest and have more of these in the fall moving forward. So thank you all. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.